Philip, welcome to the show. Welcome to the podcast. I'm really excited to have you here because you have a lot of experience in IT, and especially for the last 3 years, you've been working as a fractional CTO, right? So you've been in the IT industry for over 17 years, and people who are listening to this podcast will be most likely interested in the transition. What was it like to go from being a full-time employee to suddenly just working on your own as a solopreneur kind of, right? And being the fractional CTO eventually for several companies. So what was it like for you?
So yeah, it wasn't a very conscious decision. So it was more like a fluent transition from a full-time employee or a leader in a full-time employment role to an interim CTO role or fractional CTO role. And yeah, it just happened suddenly when I came back from Greece. I returned back to Germany end of 2021. I left TeamViewer, and then yeah, it was not clear how I would proceed. Like I wanted to check some of the startup companies I know, and suddenly I ended up being an interim CTO in an insurtech startup. I helped them to yeah change the organization, to establish some new roles in the company, to help them to shift towards a more agile software development model. They were introducing Scrum back in the days. And that was my first engagement. And yeah, suddenly one engagement came after another. And I found myself, yeah, being an interim and fractional CTO. And yeah, that was going quite easy and quite well in the first couple of years. So in the first 1.5 years, I would say. And then I made the conscious decision to say, well, I'm going to stay in the interim space, in the consulting space. But then also the economic changes, the economical situation has changed quite significantly. And that was also the first time where, yeah, all the new engagements were not coming to me from one moment to another. So when I needed to understand how do I position myself, right? So how do I, yeah, find engagements if they're not finding me? Yeah, and that was like the first point in time, and that this was like think beginning of last year where I really made the conscious decision to say I still want to be a consultant, an interim CTO, a fractional CTO, and that was a time where I really switched to this kind of yeah freelance role of or consulting role.
Awesome. Well, some people would say, well, he was just lucky to get the first one, but I'm sure there was more to it, right? The network helps as well,
Of
not
course.
just to get the first gig, but also the following one. So if you look at this, what actually helps you get the engagements most? If you look at different aspects of how you get clients these days.
There are several aspects. So was trying to find, so how do I position myself? So where is my target group? And my target groups are usually CEOs from software companies, or the recruiters from the software companies. So yes, of course, I need a website to appeal more professionally to the outside world. But usually my website, when I start a new website, it's unknown, right? So I need to promote the website. I need to make it public. Maybe I need to write some blog posts to optimize it for search engines, and so on and so on. But more important is especially in the beginning that you make yourself visible to the recruiters, to the service providers. So there are a couple of, not only a couple, there are dozens of service providers out there who are specialized in the executive search, who are specialized in the interim and the consulting space. And of course, you need to get into their databases. So yeah, you need to create a list of those agencies or individuals. You need to reach out to them. You need to yeah make introductory calls, and position yourself with your qualities, with your experience and your expertise. And yeah, those two are important. So the own website and the service providers. But then there is also LinkedIn, right? Because these days everyone is on LinkedIn on the business side, and also the target group, the CEOs, they are on LinkedIn as well. So making yourself visible on LinkedIn and connecting to those people on LinkedIn, engaging with them, this is quite important. And I think my last engagements were coming from a mix of LinkedIn and the recruiters. So those are still the two most important, even though I think my website and my own presence is in the long run will become more important, but at the moment it is something that you must have, but not for the purpose of getting some new engagements.
Well, it's often interesting with these websites. We put so much energy into creating them, and then they get very little traffic, if any at all, right? But LinkedIn gets traffic by naturally, organically. People go to LinkedIn, search every day. So it's great that you mentioned being active on LinkedIn and also getting in front of the recruiters. You mentioned also the agencies or the service providers. Is for them important to have certain focus or some specific experience or some background? Like how do they go about onboarding you as a partner?
I mean, first of all, I think for them it's like they want to understand how experienced you are, so that they understand in which box they can put you in. And then what qualifications you are, of course. But then it's like for them, it's like the more the merrier. Of course, if they have a database with 1,000 fractional managers or interim managers, then it's much easier for them to adjust to the market needs of a new customer and to find a new interim CTO, CFO, whatsoever, relatively quickly. So, of course, if you are professional, if you have a lot of experience in your field, no matter if you're a developer who want to become a freelancer or an executive who want to become an interim CTO, CEO, CFO, like if you have some experience, that's okay for them. So they are not dropping you out of any list just because, you answered one question wrong. So it's not like an interview process per se, but of course they want to qualify if you are a good addition to the database.
Awesome. And would you say, is it important to focus on certain niche or an industry? Like, for example, I know fractional CTOs who specialize only in software as a service companies, or others focus on fintech, for example, the industry, right? So do you also have such focus?
That's still something I'm trying to figure out. I think, well, let me start it differently. So there are many executives out there, CTOs, for example, who have mostly worked in the fintech area, and then per se their special industry is fintech. So they are in this niche automatically. My niche is, I would say that I'm an expert in being super general. And I'm always trying to find a certain niche where I want to focus on, but then I also realize that I'm very, very good in switching contexts and adapting best practices and patterns from one industry and bringing it to another. So and I think this is why, even if everyone is telling me why I should focus on one niche and one industry, I always found myself like, no, I like switching those industries. And I think there are a lot of common best practices that are independent from any niche and in industry, and that's why I don't have any yet.
Awesome.
Maybe it will come later, I don't know.
Well, it actually makes sense. If you get clients this way, then why would you get a niche, right? So if this is your specialty, then that's great. To be aware of it and even promote it, probably, right? Do you also communicate this somehow externally on LinkedIn or through blog posts?
I think when you look at my posts on LinkedIn or on my website, that you would see that, of course, I'm specialized in the technology area and I position myself as an interim and fractional CTO. But regardless of those two fields, like there is a lot of, I can be in any field, like from fintech to insurtech to e-commerce to B2B SaaS companies. And I already worked in all those industries. So I have experience in all those fields. And of course, I'm not writing in every statement and sentence that, I'm doing everything. And I also know that many people see this as something that disqualifies you from becoming a CTO in a certain area. But for me, being this kind of super jack of all trades, that's who I am actually.
Awesome. Okay. And are there some other aspects of your experience, or maybe some of the activities that you are conducting, something that helps you get clients besides the activity?
So mostly engaging on LinkedIn. That's my most time-consuming activity. So I'm writing content on LinkedIn or providing content on LinkedIn like 3 times a week at least. And of course, that takes time. I have not outsourced this, so all the content is by myself so far. And yeah, that is making that. Why am I doing it? Because it's still, I mean, if I'm working like 8 to 8 or 10 hours per day for a client, and in the evening I'm sitting there and writing blog posts or content for LinkedIn, why am I doing this? Because I want to be visible, and I know that as an interim CTO, so most of the companies I'm connected to at this very moment in time, they do not need an interim CTO, right? But maybe at some point in time in the future, they do. And at this point in time, I want to be present in the back of the heads of the CEOs. They should remember who I am, what I'm doing, what kind of leadership qualities I could bring to the organization, or experience and expertise I could bring to the organization. And that's why I try to be visible to them all the time, so that whenever this kind of opportunity arises, that they always think about me.
It's
Maybe that's a bit naive, I don't know, but that's
Mhm.
part of my strategy and game plan.
Yeah, well, I guess this content marketing works in the long run, so it's great to see that you are also doing it. And if there are some people who are now wondering, okay, how do I get my first gig, my first job, and um, how long does it take for you, for example, to keep posting and keep engaging with prospective clients until they convert? What's the average lead time, if we can, say so?
That totally depends. If they're coming, if recruiters are contacting you, then it can go quite quickly. So it can take like 1, 2, 3 weeks, because those companies are usually in a hurry. Maybe their CTO left and they need a replacement, a temporary replacement. It's clear that it's only temporary, so then the whole recruiting process is shorter. Of course, that's going quite quite yeah, swiftly. On the other hand, if you are engaging on a regular or unregular basis with some of the CEOs on LinkedIn, or maybe you already met them and you have some meetings here and there, then maybe you have a conversation like half a year ago, and then suddenly 6 months later, 9 months later, they're getting back to you, and suddenly they need you for, yeah, maybe agile transformation. Yeah. And
Mm.
so you cannot really measure it, but usually it's like when the recruiters are getting back to you, it's faster, it's easier. And everything that you are building up on LinkedIn, or that's more sustainable, more long run, um, but also more interesting, I have to say.
Yeah, yeah. And if you look at your standard average week, yeah, you could work, let's say, 50 hours or 60 hours probably, if there is something really, important, or maybe just 40. So how many hours per week do you dedicate to content production and marketing and outreach on LinkedIn and all these activities that you enumerated? I'm just kind of thinking about the people who are now wondering, okay, I will make the switch and I'll work 8 hours for the client, and then, or maybe 10, and then I need to allocate additional time for all these other activities, right?
It also depends on how much time you want to spend, right? If you're already in engagement, then you do not have the necessary urgency to like spend additional 5 hours per day in cold outreach calls, or yeah, writing content on LinkedIn. So, but of course, when you don't have an engagement, when you're not in an interim position, then yeah, maybe you have some more time. Then you're spending 5, 6, 7, 8 hours per day in
Mm.
trying to figure out how to get the next gig, right?
Yeah.
Um, so that all depends. It depends on how eagerly you want your next job or your next client. Um, and for example, I'm usually nearly full time booked, but I'm still spending like 1, 2 hours per day in marketing related stuff. But this is up to me. I could also limit it to like half an hour, or even could even skip it for some time, and that would not hurt me because I'm in a longer term contract at the moment. Um, but of course, I see this more like what I'm investing now might pay back later in a positive way. So that's why I'm doing it.
Yeah. Well, some people say that it's too late to do the marketing when you already need the job, right? Then you just need to rely on headhunters coming back to
Yeah.
you. Mm.
And the thing is, I mean, I hate those cold outreaches, like cold calling people and so on. And there was a time last year when I saw myself in a position like, hey, I'm doing it now. Um, but I hate it. And if I don't want to do it, then I try to invest some more in more sustainable relationship building now, and might benefit at the later point in time, and don't maybe then I don't need to do all those cold calling or whatsoever.
Yeah. Well, I guess also the service providing companies help, right? Because the more companies you sign up for, the more of them will reach out in the long run, right?
Potentially, yes. It's also a numbers game, of course.
Mm.
I mean, for me, it doesn't hurt if it's better that I'm in 200 databases of recruiters in comparison if I would just be in five.
Yeah.
So of course, I try to be in as much as possible.
Mm. It's really good that you mentioned the databases that someone like you can actually sign up to, because often people just think about LinkedIn and being active on LinkedIn, but now a whole new world of um, prospective clients, or these are not clients, these are proxies, right? They open up for you. Um,
Exactly.
Awesome. And what is next when you get a prospective client? You need to pitch your services, right? What are some of the aspects that those clients, prospective clients, they value most? Like, what are the selling points that you as a fractional CTO can say that you bring to the table?
Sometimes especially when the recruiters and the service providers are contacting you, then it's a mix of, are you a good fit to their company needs, technical needs? Are you fitting the role, and are you available? And
Mhm.
are you a good fit to the company culture? So, um, of course, the recruiting process is, yeah, quite shorter than a usual CTO or executive recruiting process if they are only looking for an interim manager. Um, but yeah, and now I lost what I wanted to say.
Yeah. So if we look at some standard skills, right? Like, I'm not saying everyone can, but a lot of people out there can manage technical teams. A lot of people can work with software architects and migrate to cloud or organize agile transformation, right? Like, these are, well, I'm not saying easy skills, right? Of course, by any chance, but I mean like senior people who have been in IT for several years, right? But for some reason they choose you or some other fractional CTO. So what are some additional reasons on top of the kind of baseline?
That is so unique to every job opening and every interim allocation. So I mean, every CTO role is different, from startup to scale up to enterprise. And even in startups, every CEO is looking for a different kind of CTO. One CEO might be more having more technical prowess and needs someone helping him to realize the technical roadmap. Someone else might be less technical and might someone helping him to understand what the techies are telling him all the day. So this is why every interim gig is so unique, right? Because every CEO, every company is looking for something totally different. Some companies are in an unstable situation because maybe they're in the middle of a transformation or a change when their CTO left. So you need to come in, you need to stabilize and fulfill the transformation or fulfill the change. Others are in having operational issues, having facing incidents and outages, and that's maybe the reason why the CTO needed to leave. So you need to come in and you need to help them to establish processes, get a hold on those outages and bring the availability up to 99.9%, and so on and so on. So everything it's so different, and yeah.
Awesome. Well, it must be a challenging job indeed, to come and replace someone who just left suddenly, abruptly. It doesn't sound like an easy job to do, really, like to be on a short-term contract and having some tough KPIs.
That's why it helps when you have some experience in many industries and you have already seen a lot of um, usually when you're joining a company, the things that you see, you're not seeing for the first time. Of course, the company is different. Every company is different. But the challenges are usually quite similar. Um, and that's why they need someone who can hit the ground running and can try to help to get up to speed very quickly. And that's not, and that sounds like it's contradictory to what I said before, but actually it isn't, right? I mean, you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah, sure, sure. Awesome. And with these decision makers, how important is it to be able to speak their language, right? Because as a CTO, you focus on technology, innovation, R&D, but suddenly you might be exposed to chief financial officer or chief marketing officer, CEO, right? So how important is it to speak their language?
Super important. I mean, that is something that I'm telling engineers all the time because when you talk to them and they tell you what they think what a CTO would do, they think only in the technology field. They think about, okay, a CTO needs to know literally everything in many programming languages, all the concepts. So he's actually the best engineer or the best tech expert in the company. In reality, first of all, that's not the case. Secondly, if you're the best engineer in the company, maybe then you're also getting a bottleneck very soon. So it's even more important to build bridges because as a CTO, you understand what the engineers are telling you. You understand the technical background. You are able to ask the right questions, and you're able to translate it to a CFO, to a CEO, and to all the other peers in the organization. And that's why engineers usually think that, and I was also an engineer, that's why I can relate to that. It's like, I was thinking about why is someone not interested in the best technical solution? And yes, the best technical solution takes time. It will take 6 months, and this is the only way. And when you're in a more senior position, you realize that there are more requirements to a tech product than the best technical solution. So there is time to market, there are financial restrictions, there are legal restrictions, and so on and so on. So all those things are coming into play as well. Find the right balance and the right solution for the company, which might not be the best technical solution. But also you should not make like false compromises, but finding the right sweet spot and how to find the right balance between a good technical solution and all the other requirements from the other departments. And I think a good CTO can do all this, finding the right balance.
Well, that sounds quite difficult, quite challenging. And how do you actually learn the business vocabulary, the terms like profitability is probably the easiest one, but the go-to-market or ROI or like just to be able to engage with all these other decision makers in the C-suite?
There are multiple ways how to learn it. I learned it by practicing it. So of course, the moment you put yourself into situations where not only your technical qualities are expected, and this is all the time the case when you're in getting into leadership positions, that is the moment when there is more expected from you than only the technical prowess. And then you start learning by doing. Of course, you can find dozens of Udemy courses, you can find books. Best case is maybe you have a mentor who can help you learning those things and help you getting there. But in practice, most of the people they learn by doing, especially those who are coming from a more technical engineering related sector and are aiming for leadership role. They learn by doing and also learn by failing.
Well, some people also embark on this executive MBA journey. So would you say this education is also important for a role of the fractional CTO, or if that's rather a corporate style of the education?
I don't know actually. Why? Because I think executive MBA can lift you up quite significantly and also open new doors. It's also usually quite expensive. So, and most of the people I met in the industry, in the interim space, in the consulting space, most of them, they do not have an executive MBA.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that this is worthless or it's like, but it's like in practice, most of the people don't do it.
What are the prerequisites to becoming a CTO? Because there may be someone who is now listening to this podcast is a VP of engineering or probably a CTO in a smaller organization, smaller startup, and he or she is thinking, okay, how do I know I can do this? Because there is no certification, right, for a fractional CTO. There is no, or maybe there is, but what do you think based on your experience?
So first of all, you can always try it out, and you will never know for sure when you are switching from a full-time employment role to a freelance role as an interim CTO that you will be able to make it. What I can tell you is that I met many people in leadership roles who already have CTO experience and CTO level, even though they never had like a CTO role, but they have already everything what it needs to have to become a CTO. They have an understanding about strategic thinking, about decision making, about expectation management, about all those things that are relevant for making a transition from a pure engineer to a technology leader. And a CTO in a startup can be more engineering focused and more hands-on engineering focused in comparison to a director of engineering in a bigger company who is much more involved in strategic decision making and who has more teams under his control, so to say, than a CTO in startups. Even though those are two different titles, and when you look on it on the paper, like the CTO role is the higher role than the director role, right? So that's why there is no black and white binary decision that you can make to understand if someone already has all the qualifications and qualities for becoming a CTO. Usually, most of the people I met, they came to a point in their career where they knew that they have everything they need to have so that they can make this step, and most of them were right when they made the step.
Yeah, yeah, awesome. And we are always talking about a CTO role, fractional CTO, but there are also other titles such as a CIO, right? Chief Information Officer. So have you also seen fractional CIOs? Is that a thing?
Or,
Yeah.
of course. I mean, I have seen fractionals, no, not fractional, interim CEOs. I haven't seen fractional CEOs. But of course, fractional is only like a part of being interim, right? So you're an interim CEO, but not on a full-time scale, but maybe 2 days per week. So yes, I have seen fractional CFOs, I have seen fractional CIOs, fractional CTOs, and so on. So this term fractional is still relatively new. It feels like it's relatively new. And most of the people still think about interim and not fractional, but it actually doesn't. I mean, it's not only about CTOs, it's about all executive roles can become interim and fractional.
Yeah, it's actually interesting now when you mention the word fractional, it essentially means part-time, right?
Exactly.
But probably part-time was not cool enough, so someone invented this label, fractional, but it essentially means working part-time, right? And the interim, if I understand it correctly, it means temporarily, right?
And usually the part-time CTO is also only there for a temporary amount of time. So of course, an interim CTO is there for maybe 4 or 5 days per week, while a fractional CTO can have like 2 or 3 customers at the same time, or 2 or 3 clients. And maybe for one, he's working just 1 day per week, and for the others, 2 days per week. That might work, right? But the interim CTO is usually working only for one client, and that's more like a full-time engagement. But both of them, and that's at least to my understanding and my experience, so both are only not part-time jobs, but only temporary job allocations.
Well, it's actually really funny because if you look at people's career, like they keep changing jobs anyway. So essentially, practically all jobs are temporary, until people change jobs. So
True.
but still, someone had this urge to invent the word interim, temporary. So but anyway, jokes aside, this is a role that is also important and growing in demand, right, in the long run. Probably there was a little dip in the last 6 months or 12 months. Is that also something you have experienced?
Yeah, definitely. Especially middle of last year, 2023 was quite challenging. But I think it's slightly getting better now. I see this also when I talk to other colleagues and so on. They also had difficulties last year, but not only in the interim space and not only for interim CTOs, but in the whole consultancy area. And I mean, let's face it, even if you're an interim CTO and you're coming in for a specific role, your job is also more comparable to a consultant, because whatever you do in the company is, yeah, you know that you will only be there for a very short period of time. And even if you joked about like, hey, even the full-time employees are only there for a short period of time, because also usually no one is being in a company forever. Then it's like the time scale is quite different. Like employees usually stay like 2 years or even a bit more.
Mm.
And the interim guy, the freelancer, the consultant, he's staying like 3 months, 6 months, 1 year at most.
Yeah, yeah. Awesome. Okay, well, that's really interesting to hear and learn more about your experience transitioning to being the CTO. And now I'm confused with all these, CTO, CIO, CFO, but yeah, CTO. So if there is someone listening and wondering whether to become a fractional CTO or when is the best time or has some concerns, is there any last advice that you would like to give to this person before we wrap it up?
If you are not sure, if you want to become a freelancer, a consultant, an interim CXO, whatever, um, either you know already deep in your heart that you want to do it, and then just go for it, try it out, or advice, right? There are people like you or me who already made those transitions by ourselves, who can support them in the transition period, and can help them to also find their first jobs. And I think that's the most essential part for them. So when they are able to sign their first client, so getting to this point, like this is the hardest part, and it is depending on so many factors, how quickly this can go, like the economical situations, then how you represent yourself in the outside market, are your qualities needed at this point in time, and so on and so on. So it can take like a couple of weeks, it can take like a couple of months, and yeah, you need to realize that whatever you do, don't do it only for a short term, but also invest in the long term connections, relationships, and so on.
Mm. Awesome. And what would you say is next for someone like you or someone who has been a fractional CTO for 5 years or 10 years? Is there some next career step for people like you?
I have talked to a lot of people who are doing this for many, many years, um, even 20 years or even more. And at some point in time, they are happily retiring or only doing it for like a couple of gigs per year, only a couple of months, and the rest of the time they're spending their time at home with their families or at the beach and whatsoever. I have also seen people turning their consultancy business into like a real company. Um, or some people, they switched over again to a full-time employment role. They were in an interim role and the company was so good, and they got an offer they cannot refuse, so they
Mm.
decided to stay. That's quite rare, I would say, and but still, that is also one opportunity what you can do after your consultancy or interim role.
Interesting. Well, then the future is bright. That's awesome. And where can people connect with you if they would like to learn more about you or read some of the blog posts that you mentioned?
At the moment, the best way and the easiest way is to follow me on LinkedIn and to get in touch with me. I also have my website, deutscherconsulting.com. I'm on X. I'm also on Instagram. But the most easiest part is to get in touch with me on LinkedIn. Yeah. So whoever wants to get some advice or talk to me about if it's the right time to switch over to an interim CTO role or even a full-time CTO role, and you do not know if you already have all the qualities and everything that you need. So feel free to reach out to me and let's talk.
Awesome. So I'll include these links in the show notes and also on YouTube in the description. Awesome. Well, thanks a lot for joining. It was very nice learning from your experience, and I'm sure a lot of people now feel pumped up and keen to give it a try as
Hope
well.
so. Thanks for having me.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you.